So what was the vote?
I amended to go to an R2, and that went down. R2, and so and then Ryan, he had. Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and open tonight's meeting of the Kalispell Planning Commission and look to the look for a roll call.
Rory Young?
He's online.
Rory Young?
He's on there. We'll
Tim Stockland? Pip Burke?
Here.
Shelby Odell?
Here.
Bud Kaufman?
Here.
Joshua Borgart?
Here.
Chad Graham?
Here. Okay, quorum is present. I'm going to move forward with approval of the minutes from May 14th, 2024. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move approval of the minutes from May 14th, 2024.
Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I'm going to move into hear the public portion of our meeting tonight. This would be where I'm going to open up for any public comment on matters that are not currently on tonight's public hearing as agenda items. If you have public comment, please step to the mic and state your name and your address. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close tonight's hear the public and move into tonight's public hearing. There are 3 items tonight on our agenda. The first one is file KA 24-04, Flathead County Health Center, Inc., doing business as the Greater Valley Health Center, has submitted a petition for annexation and initial zoning of B2 general business for property located at 1935 3rd Avenue East. The second item is KA-24-05. Joe Gardner has submitted an application for annexation and initial zoning of R2 residential for properties located at 1628 and 1636 South Woodland Drive. There's an existing house at 1636 with South Woodland, which is already within the city limits. And the third is files KPUD 24-01 and KPP 24-02, a request from Kalispell National Multifamily LLC for Bloomstone Phase 4, which includes applications for a plan unit development amendment to the overall Bloomstone PUD and major preliminary plat on approximately 16.6 acres of land. We'll get started with the first one.
All right, thank you. Flathead Community Health Center, which is doing business as Greater Valley Health Center, submitted a petition for annexation and initial zoning of B2, which is general business, for property located at 1935 3rd Avenue East. The existing building and a portion of the parking lot is currently within the city limits, and this petition would annex the remaining portion of the parking lot. The annexation includes all of one parcel right here, and then the rear portion of a separate parcel that fronts on 5th Avenue East. That parcel is currently vacant. It's intended that both parcels would then be aggregated into the larger lot that's already within the city. Up in this area is where you've got the existing building and the existing parking lot, which extends down into that area. Utilities are in both 3rd and 5th on both sides of the property, both water and sewer, although you really wouldn't be needing that for the portion that's being redeveloped with the parking lot. It is adjacent to the city limits and in a wholly surrounded area and is within the annexation boundary. It's just a photo of the lot looking to the south. The existing zoning is County B2, and what's being proposed is City B2. The Kalispell Growth Policy Future Land Use Map designates the property as primarily commercial with a portion of high-density residential. The zoning ordinance contemplates B2 as an appropriate zone within the commercial land use designation, and the B2 zone is very similar to both the current county zoning and the city zoning in the surrounding area. Under section 27.20.070 of the zoning ordinance, lots should not be split into 2 or more zones if possible. As I mentioned, it's intended that these parcels would be aggregated into a larger property. It is important to note that the growth policy is not itself a regulation. It is a policy document that guides regulation. As such, the map designation should not be viewed as fixed lines on a map, and the appropriate zoning district for the property as a whole should be based on growth policy map designations as well as the nature of the existing use of the property, which is the parking for the existing office building, and the existing county zoning that is in place. Under both city and county zoning, B2 zoning matches the existing condition more closely than a residential district would. Taking into account the growth policy map, existing county zoning, and the existing use, the requested zone of B2 would comply with the growth policy, and applying that district to the entire property would be consistent with the zoning ordinance. With that, staff recommends that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report KA 2404 as findings of fact, and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the property be annexed and that the zoning for the property be City B2 General Business. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
No.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open this item up for public comment. Step to the mic with your name and your address if you have public comment. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close that and look to the board for a motion.
I move that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report number KA-24-04 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the property be annexed and the zoning for the property be City B2 General Business.
Second.
The motion is seconded. Is there any discussion? Very simple, straightforward.
Yeah.
Check the parking lot.
Okay. I can't imagine how this is a bad thing.
Yeah. Roll call.
Joshua Borgart,
Aye.
Doug Kaufman,
Yes.
Shelby Odell,
Aye.
Pip Burke,
Aye.
Rory Young,
Aye.
Chad Graham.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. And move into tonight's second item.
Okay, so Joe Gardner submitted an application for annexation and initial zoning of R2 residential for properties located at 1628 and 1636 South Woodland Drive. There's an existing house at 1636, which is already within the city limits in that location there. The annexation would bring in the remaining properties. There's a number of properties, 6 I believe, in this area right through here that's shown as subject property. But bring that into the city limits and create a buildable site on a separate lot for a second single-family dwelling, which would include access to city water and sewer. There is water and sewer available within South Woodland Drive. I would note, as you see here, and there's some more detail on a site plan that they have. A lot of the properties are actually within the slough area. And the second house is a separate property owner that's not part of the transaction that's going on here. This is a picture of the property from the front. And this is that proposed amended plat and site layout. Here's the existing home. The other home that's not part of this would be down here. You can see that there's a number of parcels that come through here. They're kind of squarish as we're coming back through here. Some of them are entirely within the slough. But the concept here, just so you can kind of see the context, is they were going to be annexing these 6 lots coming through here. They're going to be aggregating this into one lot 2A and then this into a 3A with the access coming through a shared driveway down to here and water and sewer services, I believe, coming through this area in that direction. So even though we're creating a parcel, this isn't a subdivision. We're aggregating lots together. We're taking the number and putting them into 2 lots and then bringing the entirety into the city. And I would also note that the way that our zoning and subdivision regulations do work, they would have enough access for 1 unit in the back. They wouldn't have access for more units than that because of the width of the right-of-way or shared driveway that would be coming down to serve that unit. It's currently zoned county R2, which is 1 family limited residential. The proposed is city R2. It's adjacent to the city limits in a wholly surrounded area and within the annexation boundary. The Kalispell growth policy designates the subject property as urban residential, which generally supports R3, R4, and R1 residential zones. The requested R2 zone is less dense than those zones and would be in line with the density limits contemplated for urban residential. This particular zone, R2, is requested because 1, the front of the property with the existing home is already annexed and already zoned R2. Secondly, the existing county zoning on the remainder of the property substantially matches city R2. 3, the majority of the city zoned property in the area includes a mix of R2, R3, and R4 zoning. And 4th, the nature of the lot is an infill lot with limited access and a significant portion being unbuildable. Does not lend itself to higher density development, which would need the smaller lot sizes from those other zones. So given the specific situation of the lot, the requested zone would substantially comply with the growth policy. With that, staff recommends that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report K-2405 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the property be annexed and that the zoning for the property be city R2 residential, and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I guess I can kind of see on top of the existing house there's that road that comes through. Is that the one that they're planning on using?
You're talking about right through here?
Yeah.
Right. That goes along with this property right here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the current property owner actually owns all of that, and that they're looking at through this amended plat and aggregation would be transferring that second created lot to the applicant.
Okay.
Are they looking to build 1 house or 2 or
Just one.
just 1? Okay.
Yeah. I'll go back to that here. So, yeah, this is the existing house there. This would be the approximate site that they'd be putting in that other house, but looking for just 1 dwelling unit going in the back.
Is there any concern with the river being right there of, the flood at all, or like the land kind of giving way? I know there's a slant there.
Yeah, there really isn't that much of an issue with flooding. It's the pretty steep bank that goes down quite a ways, and it's not floodplain. Anytime you're doing building construction that's near a slope like that, there's some building code ratios that they do, and that can affect the foundation design or the distance that you're away from that. So they haven't made that application yet. I don't know. They may have put together some plans, but they'll need to go through that with the building permit.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm gonna open this item up for public comment. So if you have public comments, just step to the mic with your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Susan Payne. I'm here with my husband Marshall. We are the owners of the property at 1604 South Woodland Drive, which is immediately north of this proposed roadway that you've mentioned. I have sent in a prior mailing to you that shows, hopefully, some photos to you about our property and the scale of this roadway. I am concerned about the roadway because currently, as you noticed in the photograph that initially showed, there is an electric pole right there that's going to be in the same area that this planned roadway is supposed to be maintained. I have very little information as a homeowner as to what kind and size or changes in the roadway will take place. I don't know if they plan on it being a 2-lane roadway, a 1-lane roadway, because the photograph that I sent you showed the scale of our car on that roadway. And you can see that it is not meant for normal transportation between vehicles. It'll have to be a 1-lane type of roadway, but I have no information on that. And I also have no information as to whether the city will be maintaining this roadway once it's annexed in. And so I have concerns about the roadway. I also mentioned in my letter my concerns about how this is going to affect us, even though nobody has mentioned it. We are the people that are on the property of Block 3, which is just north of this Block 4 proposal. And Block 3, if you are annexing that, nobody's mentioned that, that is in your letter that you want to annex our property, we would be really requesting not to have it annexed. It's been in our family for over 60 years. We have a back lot there that we use, and we want to have access to that lot, which I realize a roadway that we have currently provides that. But at the same time, in order to annex our property, that also means that we would have to go on to the sewer system, the city sewer system, which means our property will be dug up and we'll have to pay not only for having the sewer system put in, but also for having our sprinkler system removed and changed. And it just seems to be a lot of cost for us for this project to go forward when it comes to this roadway. And so the electric pole placement and also the single lane that's available for this roadway, and also the fact that, we're incurring a lot of costs that is not something that we would like to incur, of course. I just would like you to consider that, because it doesn't just affect this area or this homeowner, it also affects us. And even though the proposed building site is way in the back of that property, as mentioned over here by the gentleman early on, there are other sites out there, and they may not be particularly great for putting in homes, but I see nothing standing in the way of somebody wanting to sell out of those other lots and then putting in more homes, which would then put more traffic on that roadway, which then does impact the traffic moving on and off of South Woodland Drive. So please take those things into consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment? Okay, I'm gonna look to the board for a motion.
Chad?
Oh,
And then check online.
So my name's Joe Gardner. As far as the roadway, it was a driveway easement already in place, and my driveway is 12 foot wide, and it doesn't even start until you hit the parcels in the back behind her house. So it's really, it's a single family dwelling. It's just a driveway. It's not a roadway. So I don't see how this would really affect them at all. So, yeah, thanks.
thank you. Is there anybody online?
No. Can I respond to that again?
We just do one time. We'll get into discussion. Okay, I'm gonna look to the board for a motion.
I move this, pardon me, I move the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report KA-24-05 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the property be annexed and the zoning for the property be City R2 residential. Second.
And the motion is seconded. Discussion, or I guess I have some questions of staff from public comment. I guess I would wonder, this is This is a driveway, not a road, right? I mean, it's not gonna be a named street or anything.
Correct. So under the zoning ordinance, you have to have certain widths of access. So it needs to either be on a public street or an approved private street. And the dimensions of the approved private street come out of the subdivision regulations. And that's one reason why they're really limited to just one dwelling unit in the back and not something larger than that, which is one reason why we're looking at R2 instead of RA1, for example, or something like that. So in that table, having the two lots served, you've got the house in front and then the house in back, only requires a 10-foot travel surface. And so basically, it's not even really a road, really. It comes down to it's a shared driveway. And most of it's existing up against the property, as the applicant stated, and then it kind of curves down and comes through in that direction through there. So there's really no change to that. It's not a road like a city street that goes in there. It's not a 60-foot right-of-way. It's developing that shared driveway, which I think is already developed to the standard that it needs to be. So I don't even think there's going to be any particular change there.
So then the sewer, I mean, from what I see, I mean, it's coming down below the house, down an easement there.
Right. My understanding is they were looking at maybe trying to get that into that same easement there. But because of some of the separation requirements, if I understand correctly, they had to bump it down to the other side. But yeah, there's, the water and sewer up in front here that they would tie into with that.
So it would go, looks to me like that easement's kind of where that driveway comes in, go back.
Right.
One more back.
Right there.
That middle driveway that comes in right there, I guess that's about where that easement is.
Right, and that's true. But, one thing that I would note too is that, this isn't a CUP or anything on the design and what's coming in on that. They would deal with that with the building permits. So really what's in front of everybody is just the annexation and zoning, not the design of what's in there. But that being said, the applicant has worked with the fire department as far as access and public works department as far as the utilities that would be in there, as well as the building department, going back to Shelby's question about the proximity to the slopes. So some of that preliminary discussion has been done on the site development, but that's not really subject to the review here.
Just to make sure I understand, the current existing paved access exists solely on the applicant's property, correct?
Yes.
It's not shared by anyone else besides him?
Right. Well, actually, the current owner of the property, so he's the applicant, but there's a current owner.
Right.
But correct. So, yeah, they would have those access rights coming through there. And it's my understanding there wouldn't be any change to that at all.
Okay, thank you.
It's currently on a septic system, or is it part of the city sewer? From what I can tell, it doesn't look like it.
I believe that it's on city sewer, the existing house, and right now there's no building in the back.
Right.
But that would be on sewer, so you'd have both of those on sewer. I'm presuming this is on sewer, and that's why it was annexed into the city.
So how much would it pain the surrounding neighbors to have to deal with that entire area getting torn up to be added to sewer? Because I think that might be what the concern could possibly be, is their home life just being kind of halted and interrupted with that whole tearing up this section, trying to make room for building and whatnot. You got all the construction crews coming through. I'm just concerned about disrupting life in that little tiny area.
Yeah, well, I guess a couple things. One is this is an annexation only of this property. It's not an annexation of anybody else's property. So there's annexation by petition. They're coming in to annex just this specific property, not neighbor's property. They're not going on to anybody else's property, and nobody else is required to go on sewer until such time as, say, like their septic system failed and they would need to come to the city for that. It is a wholly surrounded area, so you don't know when some of that stuff might happen anyway. But really, in terms of like construction, there's no subdivision going on. And again, we're not reviewing that. It's just bringing it into the city, but it's basically somebody building a single family house.
Right.
So there's not major tear up of the street, except to the extent that they would need to have a curb stop put in for water and the sewer connection, which is done all the time all across the city.
A couple of things. My brain remembers driving past that a couple of times, and the sign, go back on one page. One more. There you go. So that sign that is green, kind of was trying to read it and ended up looking up at it's basically don't block easement scenario. That sign, is that, so the property of that fence, is that something that is the border of the property? Is that where that's at?
I'm not sure exactly where it is. Fences are usually close, but not right on property lines.
Okay.
But
If
yeah,
people put-
again, what's here isn't looking at the design of that, and there isn't any impact on adjoining properties or any development that's going on to adjoining properties.
Okay, I just haven't seen that sign a lot, and it's a pretty bold statement to put up there just out of the blue.
So,
Okay, I'll get a roll call.
Rory Young,
Aye.
Doug Kaufman,
Yes.
Joshua Borgart,
Aye.
Pip Burke,
Aye.
Shelby Odell,
Aye.
Chad Graham.
Aye. Motion carries. And as far as council, when's this coming in front of the council?
that would be on July 1st.
July 1st. So this will be in front of the council on July 1st if you want to come and give public comment at that point in time as well. And I guess just to make sure where the questioning was coming from here is your property's not being annexed.
It says right in the letter that Block 3, lots 1 through 5 are being annexed, and that's where I live. So I don't understand that discrepancy.
Well, the legal description, I think, is the southern half of some of those. So there was an old county subdivision that was out there, and that's why you wound up with these square blocks back here. And there were roadways that came through, and those were then abandoned at one point in the county. And so you wound up, when you look at the legal descriptions, you wind up with south halves of those lots and north halves of those lots. But no, it's what's shown up here is what's being annexed in, which isn't anybody's property except the petitioners.
Yep. But again, July 1st will be in front of the council, so. Tonight's third item.
So, third item, Kalispell National.
Hold on. Rory has his hand up.
Oh. Go ahead, Roy.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself for this item. We're working with the developer in that subdivision.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so Kalispell National Multifamily LLC submitted applications for phases of Bloomstone development, which includes request for a plan unit development or PUD amendment to the overall Bloomstone PUD and major preliminary plat for Phase 4 on approximately 16.6 acres of land. The property has an existing PUD and an existing preliminary plat. The PUD amendment calls for an additional 133 units beyond the previously approved amount. The preliminary plat would replace the existing Phase 4 with a new Phase 4, including a portion of a remainder parcel. The new phase includes 135 townhouse lots, sublots, roads, and common area. The existing Phases 5 and 6 would remain in place with an increase in the number of multifamily units. The property is located on the north side of 4 Mile Drive between Highway 93, the bypass, and Kid Sports to the east. In terms of water and sewer, you've got those extended into the development generally from the north with some of the earlier phases that have been developed. And those are also present and to some extent being constructed within 4 Mile Drive. As far as roads, tree line running north-south through the development is a minor collector. 4 Mile, which would run along the southern boundary, is a minor arterial. Just a shot of the property from one of the existing areas looking to the south. Property is located in an R4 residential zoning district with the PUD overlay that originally grew out to the DNRC Spring Prairie PUD, which covers most of Section 36, running up through Costco and Glacier High School in that area. It did include plans originally for a total of 569 dwelling units on 85.2 acres. Phases 1 and 2 have been constructed. Phase 1 in this area, Phase 2 with 96 multifamily and 71 single-family units. Phase 3 has also been finished with 47 single-family units. The Kalispell Growth Policy Future Land Use Map designates the subject property as high-density residential, which would typically utilize RA1, which is residential apartment, or RA2, residential apartment office zones. The existing underlying zoning with the PUD overlay, as well as the existing and proposed development, is substantially consistent with the growth policy designation. The growth policy provides for densities up to 20 to 40 units per acre in high-density residential areas such as this. This proposal would increase the overall density from 6.7 units per acre to 8.2 units per acre. The City of Kalispell Growth Policy, Chapter 4A on housing, encourages a variety of residential development that provides housing for all sectors and income levels within the community, and also encourages development where city services such as sewer, water, and streets are in the vicinity and available to the subject property. This is showing the existing preliminary plat for phases 3 through 6 of Bloomstone. This was approved in 2020. There was a total of 57 lots in the 4 phases on approximately 33.7 acres under the existing PUD. Phase 3, as I mentioned, has since been final platted with 47 single-family lots running on north is to the left, east towards Kids Sports to the top of the page. The current approvals for the remaining phases include Phase 4, which were 4 multifamily lots with 104 dwelling units. Phase 5 had 3 multifamily lots with 88 dwelling units, and Phase 6 was 3 multifamily lots with 126 dwelling units. The total number of units within the existing platted area was 532, and that would then in addition to that, there would be 37 lots remaining in the remainder area, which brought the total of 569. This proposal would replace that existing Phase 4, which is the multifamily, some of the multifamily anyway, off of 4 Mile Drive, with a new Phase 4 that would include a portion of the remainder parcel in the center of the overall property. The new phase would include 135 townhome or sublots, an increase of 31 dwelling units for this phase, although, as I mentioned, this increase includes land from the remainder parcel. It's also intended that phases 5 and 6 would likely be consolidated into a single phase with an increase from 214 units to 288 units. Phase 7 in this area would be 65 attached single-family units, townhomes. Overall, there would be an increase of 133 units beyond the current approved amount for the PUD as a whole, for a total of 702, which, as I mentioned, equates to 8.2 units per acre. The Phase 4 town lots are generally in 2 to 4 unit configurations, again, generally 20 to 35 feet wide on the west and the south, and 40 to 45 feet on the north and the east of the property. There'd be no direct access from any of the lots onto tree line, so the density in this situation does provide for a more urban row house type of look along Tree Line Road, which is the collector, again, running down through the subdivision. The southern portion has 30-foot alleys that provide the access to the southern row of townhomes that face onto a 4 Mile Drive. Those alleys would be 20-foot paved surface with the sidewalk on one side. They would also include some visitor parking in this area, and there'd also be some visitor parking available by a clubhouse in the clubhouse park area. Most of the roads would be privately owned and maintained. Sewer and water to the subdivision would be provided by the City of Kalispell, and there's adequate capacity to serve the subdivision in both systems. Public Works included a comment that the dead-end lines shown on the south ends of these alleys, right there and there, would need to be looped within 4 Mile, along 4 Mile within the development's common area, or be addressed through another acceptable method. They also commented that the 16-inch main and rose crown coming in here would need to extend through a public street rather than one of the private streets in Phase 4. And also per the subdivision regulations, any water rights associated with the property would need to be transferred to the city of Kalispell prior to final plat. Stormwater runoff from the site would be managed and constructed per the city of Kalispell design standards for design and construction and stormwater management under the stormwater management program. Final design would be approved by the Public Works Department prior to development. Police and fire departments can both serve the site within their response areas. The overall site's generally flat on the northern portion of the property, with the slope running generally from 4 Mile Drive down to that flatter portion towards the north. It does not appear that there are any topographical issues or slopes significantly impacting development. A geotech report was prepared in 2007 as part of the original review of the project, and a supplement dated May 2024 reviewed the original report and determined that the findings are still applicable to the site. The report included recommendations for design and construction of the site and buildings, but no significant issues impacting development. And those recommendations should be followed as the site's developed. The subdivision does not contain any hazards listed under section 28303 of the subdivision regulations that cannot be eliminated or mitigated by approved design and construction plans. In relation to access and roads, the PUD as a whole is served by Tree Line Road, which connects 4 Mile Drive at the southwestern corner of the development and Old Reserve to the north. There's also a second connection onto 4 Mile Drive at the southeastern corner of the development. 4 Mile Drive, as I mentioned, is a minor arterial and connects with the bypass to the west and Highway 93 north to the east. Tree line is designated as a minor collector. 4 Mile would need to be upgraded to a minor arterial standard in accordance with standards for design and construction prior to any final plat in Phase 4. Tree line would need to be extended from the north to 4 Mile Drive, also prior to any plat in Phase 4, and would be developed to that minor collector standard. As an arterial street, no additional public or private accesses are permitted onto 4 Mile. And as a collector street, no driveways are allowed onto Tree Line as part of Phase 4. Internal to the subdivision, streets would be designed to the local street standard, except as provided with deviations in design under the PUD. Due to those deviations, shared driveways would be required in order to help minimize issues with location of hydrants, utilities, and snow storage, among other things. The shared driveways should be utilized throughout the subdivision wherever practicable. Since the street layout is not per typical city standards, all of the roads in Phase 4, except the road from the northwest corner extending along the northern boundary and connecting with Rose Crown Road at the eastern boundary, essentially coming through here and down to here, would be privately owned and maintained. And again, the only public street would be that was just showing through there through the northern portion. In addition, due to the reduced width of the alley from the standard street design, no parking would be allowed within the alley right-of-way. A traffic impact study, or TIS, is required for the development, and one was submitted by the developer. The TIS was originally prepared in May of 21 and revised in January of 24, and a technical memorandum confirmed that the earlier findings remain accurate. Under city standards, the developer will need to maintain or improve the level of service at any impacted intersections, and a condition of approval should require that any mitigation to be implemented would be necessary to meet that standard based on the TIS after acceptance of the TIS findings by the Public Works Department during the final engineering design review. It's anticipated that the intersections of Old Reserve and Tree Line, 4 Mile and Tree Line, and 4 Mile and Foxglove would require some level of mitigation, such as additional turning lanes to maintain the level of service. This is just showing standard elevation for the townhome concept. And this is showing the clubhouse within the park area. Subdivision regulations would require a minimum of 0.03 acres of parkland per unit for a single-family unit, and multifamily developments would have 500 square feet per unit as part of the building permit process. In each instance, that amounts determined as a combination of land and the value of the recreational amenities that are provided. Part of Phase 1, they provided a 1-acre park, and the multifamily project also developed a park within that phase to accommodate its recreational amenity requirement. There was additional park space provided in Phase 2. Phase 3 included a park and walking trail along the boundary with Kid Sports. The new Phase 4 that we're talking about more specifically here includes the park area with this clubhouse and outdoor courts. Phases 5 and 6, which again are multifamily lots, would have a clubhouse, pickleball courts, pool, and dog parks. And the future Phase 7 would also have additional park and amenities that would be determined. This is showing the layout on the apartment area, Phases 5 and 6, and the elevation that they're looking at. As an existing PUD, there are deviations which would continue from the prior approval. I was going to step through the existing PUD deviations from the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations that are applicable to the proposed and future phases of Bloomstone or are otherwise being modified. The modifications to the existing deviations are intended to apply to the existing conditions in a reasonable manner to the proposed townhouse configuration without substantially altering the general development standards in the PUD. The general basis for the deviations from the original PUD remain, which focused on overall design elements, the growth policy goal for a variety of housing types, and the allowable density under the growth policy. So first of all, there's a deviation from the minimum lot area from 6,000 square feet to 4,290 square feet for single-family lots. With the attached single-family configuration for Phase 4 and the future Phase 7, this deviation needs to be clarified and modified to allow for sublots at 1,760 square feet. All parent lots with sublots would still remain at 6,000 square feet or more. The deviation related to minimum lot width allows the minimum lot width to be reduced from 50 feet to 40 feet for single-family lots. With the addition of the attached single-family townhome configuration for Phase 4 and future Phase 7, this deviation would need to be clarified or modified to allow for sublot widths of 20 feet. And just as a side note, a 40-foot lot width for a single-family lot would convert to 20 feet for two sublots. In terms of a front setback encroachment, there's a deviation that would allow the front setback to be reduced to 10 feet. The reduction would only apply to the single-family residential houses, and the multifamily would need to meet the 15-foot setback generally provided for. All garages would have a minimum of 20 feet from the front property line or both frontages for through lots. With the attached single-family configuration for Phase 4 and Phase 7, this deviation would need to be clarified to allow the 10-foot front setback for the townhomes as well. It should be noted that the city's standards measure setbacks from the property line to the furthest extension of the building, such as eaves or a deck. There was a deviation for lot coverage, which allowed an increase to 54% lot coverage on 6,000 square foot lots with no restriction on what were referred to as Z lots. Z lots were a specific lot configuration in an earlier phase and do not apply in these phases. However, with the attached single-family configurations we've talked about for Phase 4, Phase 7, this deviation should be clarified to eliminate any specific lot coverage limitations on the townhome lots. There's also a continuing deviation related to subdivision identification signs. Deviation relating to building with alley access only, which would be a new deviation. Generally under zoning, in order to construct a building, a property is required to be on a lot adjacent to a public street or with access to an approved private street. This deviation would allow for a row of townhouses along 4 Mile Drive to be accessed only by a 30-foot alley, similar to what other recent approvals such as Starling on Stillwater Road have done. The deviation is based on topographical and dimensional issues, and the design is intended to allow for emergency access, which has been reviewed and accepted by the fire department. And that's shown on this detail that we have up here. They were provided with the dimensions that the fire department wanted as far as turning radiuses, and they applied that through the subdivision, and in particular through this alley configuration. Fire department reviewed that detail and found that to be acceptable. So based on those considerations, this deviation is acceptable. Another requested deviation was related to alleys being used as a primary access. Similarly to the zoning ordinance, the subdivision regulations generally provide that streets would be designed in accordance with standards for design and construction, and that alleys would not be used to provide the primary means of access to a lot. Typically with 6 or more lots that are to be served, there would be a 60-foot right-of-way with sidewalks on both sides. This proposed deviation would allow certain lots to be accessed with the 30-foot alley, the 20-foot paved surface, and the sidewalk on the one side. As I mentioned, the request is being made due to the topography of the site and the dimensional considerations. The emergency access is provided with the appropriate turning radiuses for fire trucks. With the reduced width, parking would not be allowed within the alley right-of-way. Provided that the right-of-way is privately owned and maintained and that the parking is limited, this deviation would be appropriate. There is a continuing deviation related to allowing curb bulbs to be used in the intersection of local streets. There would be a new deviation on required alleys. The subdivision regulations require alleys when subdivision developments create a street frontage density of 40 feet or less on average for a block. And again, you would have that 40-foot or fewer dimension coming down through the west and then through a portion of the south, with the remaining meeting that standard that would not require an alley. The proposed layout includes, as I mentioned, areas along the west and south boundaries that have less than the 40 feet. The property, again, has topographical challenges with a large hill that slopes down from 4 Mile Drive and dimensional considerations with the size and shape of the area between Tree Line Road and Foxglove, right on that side. Both areas affected are somewhat mitigated by the fact that the front of the houses face the main street, Tree Line and 4 Mile Drive, with access only from the rear of the house, which would be akin to an alley configuration. The developer also plans to utilize the shared driveways that we've discussed to minimize issues with hydrants, utilities, snow storage. The shared driveways would be utilized throughout the subdivision, and most of the roads would be private, as I mentioned. Subject to those conditions, this deviation would be appropriate. Another deviation related to house orientation, and generally lots along streets such as 4 Mile Drive are supposed to be oriented inward with the rear towards the street. The purpose for this is for access to the lot to come from within the subdivision rather than from the arterial coming off of 4 Mile Drive. In this case, while the house is oriented towards 4 Mile, there would not be any individual access to 4 Mile, and access would be coming from the alley that would be serving the lots. As such, this deviation request is also appropriate. In terms of through lots, another deviation would be related to through lots, which are lots that have frontage on 2 streets, as opposed to a corner lot, but through in this situation. Generally, those are not allowed unless there are specific issues related to streets, topography, or orientation. As noted relative to other deviation requests, the topography of the property and the dimensional issues related to alleys and street design led to the through lots on Tree Line. With the garages directly accessing the street, the standard 20-foot setback from the right-of-way should apply to prevent vehicles from blocking the sidewalk. Subject to the conditions related to alleys, street design, and garage setback, this deviation request would also be appropriate. So with that, staff would recommend that the Kalispell Planning Commission adopt staff report KPUD 2401 and KPP 24-02 as findings of fact, and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the amended PUD for Bloomstone and that the preliminary plat for Bloomstone Phase 4 be approved subject to the 40 listed conditions, and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions?
I'm new to the Bloomstone thing since of last month. So what was originally like planned for this section?
Okay, so let me go back real quick. So this might show up, well, it might show a little bit better in here. So the overall section, when you kind of went back to the really origin of it, was section 36, which included all the Costco and the Lowe's development out in front, the offices that are up here next to Glacier High School and coming down. So this was created as a separate PUD that had a total of 569 dwelling units on it, on about 85 acres. And so some of the initial phases, there's the Z lots that I referred to, which are essentially like townhome lots, but they're a little bit different. We're up in this area. Apartments were up in this area. Those were finished as well. And then there would be, I think, a mix of townhome and single-family development as you're coming through on the north side and adjacent to here. And then this was the The current plat had the multifamily. Essentially, kind of what they're doing in a nutshell is taking these because these multifamily ones are essentially staying the same, but adding some units to it. But they're converting these apartment units to townhome units,
Okay.
which is the phase 4, and kind of bringing that over into that remainder area a little bit. So
Okay.
if you really boil it down, that's what's going on.
Okay. In that southern section where that alley is, if you could go back to that picture, that one, where that driveway is, or that parking area right there in the southern, yep.
Right there. Mhm.
Can that at all outlet to that private area so it's a straight through, or can
There's a driving connection that goes through there, yeah.
Okay, I just couldn't tell with the line being there.
Right, that was something that they added in there to try to cut down on the block length that you're
Right.
coming through there. So, yeah, there's a drive connection that would go through.
Okay.
Is there any parking allowed along 4 Mile Drive there?
I don't believe that there is, no. Except during 3 blind refs, I guess.
Say that again.
Say, except during 3 blind refs, I guess.
Oh, right, yeah.
Probably.
Any other questions?
Just want to ask the questions because it's something to be said, not necessarily to be unknown. Each space will have how many parking spaces?
2 for the townhomes, yeah.
Perfect. And the amount of parking that is going to be available for visitors is?
Well, our standard for any single-family home is
Yep.
2. And so, there's no requirement for additional on-site. So it would just be whatever the on-street parking would be that would be handling that.
And how much on-street parking is there an estimate with this particular design? Do we know?
I'm not sure specifically. It's a little bit more limited because of some of the narrower lots that are through there, which is one reason why you would have additional visitor parking in a couple of those areas that people can park in to try to make up for that.
It would be good to have that number in the future. Seems like it's a small amount in my numerical mind, but I'm not the mathematician.
It is. And one reason we don't have that is that it's not under any subdivision requirement. It's not, the amount of on-street parking
Yep.
doesn't come into play.
Cool.
So with a PUD, I guess I've never really thought about asking this, I guess, and I guess it's not a concern or anything, but it just for my thought process. PUD allows, obviously, for deviations away from our standards and stuff. Is there ever, I'm trying to go through and think of other PUDs, is there ever kind of like a feeling where the deviations are on the lower level, on the medium level, or on the high level for deviations? And if it's on the high level, are we starting to push up against a ceiling for, deviations, or is that just what PUD, it allows for?
Well, there's no limit on the number of deviations on a PUD, and what it comes down to is design. And so in the context of a PUD, it allows deviations from what those standards are. And sometimes it's to account for unique aspects of the site, but overall, what you're doing in those situations is focusing on the design more than you would with something that was coming through under standard zoning. So there's no limit on the number of deviations that are there. There were a number here. Part of that is the existing PUD. Most of those deviations are already in place. It's just tweaking them so it fits with a townhome type of layout instead of just a single-family apartment type of layout. Most of the other ones were just different spots that came in relating to the use of the alleys or the lack of alleys in some of the areas. So that's where most of them came through. But there's no particular limit on anything. It just comes down to making a design that functions and works.
And without, I guess, maybe it's here.
But it's certainly up to the planning commission and council's discretion of maybe what they feel maybe isn't gonna work, or if
Well, I
there's
mean, I want
concerns.
to use I
Yeah.
want to use that. I mean, if that's the tool of, the plan unit development to go through and get get a good development put together.
Right.
I've always kind of wondered why other properties or projects or applicants don't go through the PUD process with some of their stuff. What drives one applicant to do it and other applicants to not do it,
A lot of it
because
just
you
comes
have
down
that
to what,
flexibility.
a lot of it comes down to what their particular project is and if it fits within the standard zoning and subdivision regulations. And some people choose to do that. It's one less step in the process that you need to go through, and some
As
people
far
prefer to do that.
as a city, the deviations away from the standards and stuff, on our end, we get what for that?
So you can start putting other conditions on things. Sometimes you get more open space. Sometimes you get more park area that comes with it. In some of these situations, for example, having the private, because it's not your standard design, that was something that Public Works really wanted to see, was having those as private roads. And that's something that you typically wouldn't do in a straight subdivision that wouldn't be part of a PUD. And so in some of those situations, like, they were comfortable with that as long as it was privately maintained, and you can get there through a PUD in a way that you can't with the regular process. So that's why sometimes it comes up. But we've done a lot of PUDs. There's about 50 or so in the city.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And just a generic question, is there another example that you have where public roads are mixed with city roads in everything from at this point, let's just talk about the snow removal. Can you give examples in the city that do this?
Well, one that immediately comes to mind is Starling.
Yep.
We did that. There's a mix in there.
And has there
If
been
Keith was
any
here, there'd
issues
probably-
with any of that?
No, we include notes on the plat to kind of make that clear. Part of final plat, they need to provide details on, typically through their covenants, as far as maintenance and assessments on those. And then we also include waivers of protest to SIDs. So if for some reason they fail to maintain those, then we can impose an SID in order to make that up.
And that flows down to closing if somebody's buying a piece of property and stuff, so people are made
It's all
aware
matter
of all
of record.
those
Yep,
differences.
it's part of the chain of title. Yeah.
If they look. I mean, to be honest. So I think a good example to answer your question too is, pretty much all the alleys we do, just knowing that alleys require a ton of maintenance, there's a lot of cost that goes with it, are all private, Meadows Edge has that. But also pretty much every multifamily development you see, the drive aisles and the parking areas are all private. And, they're serving hundreds of units. So this is kind of similar. It's like a single family, but you can almost look at it in that context too, that it's maybe like a parking lot but it's private. So you could take that context too, because the public street, we have those standards because it's public. We have to own it, maintain it, plow it. In this case, we wouldn't be doing that. So it would have to be accounted for within their HOA documents, but yeah.
I got another question to bounce off of Joshua's parking question. Is there gonna be any parking on Tree Line or Foxglove or Rose Crown? Because if there's not a lot of parking in that neighborhood specifically for guests, and they're having graduation parties, like there was a ton in, Evergreen for graduation this last month, they might park over at, Kids Sport and those areas. Is there gonna be sidewalks to support that, or?
Well, there'd be sidewalks through the whole development and
Right.
would connect into, bike path on 4 Mile. As far as parking, you typically don't have that on the collector, but you would typically have that on local streets.
Okay.
With the apartments on the other side over here, they would have parking with their ratios. But again, as a general rule, it's, we don't look at on-street parking as part of that. The parking demand for a single-family unit, whether it's a townhome or the standard single-family home, is 2 per dwelling unit, and they provide that in here. So in terms of the number of parking spaces they're being required to provide, they're actually providing more than what typically would be there because they'd be having these visitor parking areas. If it was straight zoning, you wouldn't have any of those required, and it would just be the 2 parking spaces per unit.
Are those 3 either sidewalk extensions or trail extensions that are on the south side going to 4 Mile? Is that what those are? They're kind of grayish.
This coming down?
No, that whole, not that whole thing, just below that line, there's like little gray lines coming down. Are those connections to the a trail or something on?
I think on this side and over here, I think there weren't going to be individual connections coming down.
Not off, no, yeah, not off the pieces of property, but off of like in the
There
middle
was-
there, you can see there's like a walkway or a trail coming
Yeah,
down.
I can't remember off the top of my head if there was a third one there, but there is. Yeah.
Well,
Not
let's, I'll be opening it up for public comment.
But yeah, no, there would be a couple connections. You can't get you can't get the individual connections.
No, yeah.
Coming up there, but with the sidewalk on the one side coming down, both of these alleyways and then connecting over here, there was also connections that would bring that out to 4 Mile.
I don't know.
And again on this one too.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna open this item up for public comment. If you have public comments, step to the mic and state your name and address.
Yeah, they're going up, but yeah, you just go up to that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Weber. My address is 11488 Gambala Lane in Big Fork. I'd like to speak specifically as it pertains to the multifamily development along Treeline Road, Bloomstone. So I'm an owner and developer of apartments on Treeline Road, and I'm speaking on behalf of Frontier Apartments that's located at the north end of Bloomstone. So as you know, Bloomstone received PUD approval way back in 2008, and the city of Kalispell granted apartment development along Treeline Road. The 2008 PUD permits low-density apartments with 15 apartment units per acre. But here's the problem. Since 2008, Bloomstone hasn't built any apartments. However, other apartments have been constructed along this tree-line corridor. The Frontier Apartments that we're currently constructing, along with there's other apartments that have already been built. These apartments have all been held to the standard of Bloomstone's 2008 apartment density. All of these apartments have been built with that standard of 15 apartment units per acre. So in 2018, we started developing Frontier Parcel. It's about 8.5 acres, but we were required to develop the property with low-density apartments. Again, we're building 15 apartment units per acre. We have stayed consistent and in harmony with Bloomstone and their 2008 PUD for low-density apartments. Now, given the increased density that Bloomstone is requesting, if we applied those same metrics to our property on Frontier, we would be able to build an additional 50 apartment units. Bloomstone seeks a PUD amendment that would allow increased density for their apartment construction in phase 5 and 6. So instead of building 15 apartment units per acre, as other developers have been required to do, they would be allowed to increase to a density of 22 apartment units per acre. Not really fair to other developers. So the unit count, as previously has been mentioned, for Bloomstone Apartments for phase 5 and 6 would increase from 214 units up to 288 units, which is an overall increase of 74 apartment units. So again, Bloomstone requests a PUD amendment after others have developed apartments, including us, building Frontier Apartments. But we've been held to the standard of their 2008 PUD for low-density apartments through this corridor, building 15 apartment units per acre and not 22. These same standards that we've been held to, Bloomstone should also be held to. Frontier Apartments opposes this increased density for Bloomstone Apartments for Phase 5 and 6. Bloomstone's parcel should be subject to the same limitations as other neighboring parcels, including our parcel, Frontier parcel, which is currently under construction. I respectfully urge the board to uphold decisions that have previously been made regarding apartment density along this tree line road corridor. Consistency in these types of decisions is critical in maintaining a fair and impartial development landscape, thus ensuring that no single developer gains an unfair advantage over another. So out of fairness and consistency, Frontier Apartments requests that Kalispell City Planning denies Bloomstone's request for any increase in apartment density. Bloomstone, after all, should be bound by its previous PUD for low-density apartments along Tree Line Road. And Bloomstone should build apartments at the same rate of 15 apartment units per acre. I appreciate your time. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Other public comment?
Todd, can you hear us?
I can now. Does that mean I'm up?
Yes.
My name's Todd Whipple with Whipple Consulting Engineers. I couldn't be there this evening. Elliot Whipple and Austin Fuller are there. I think I heard Elliot chime in on a earlier response. My address is 21 South Pines Road, Spokane Valley, Washington, 99206. I want to thank PJ and the city staff for working through this with us. PUD modifications, when we started, a little bit in response to what you just heard, when we started this, the Bloomstone PUD and plat had generally become stagnant. And the only way to continue to move it forward was to do or propose and ask for this PUD amendment. Anyone could have done the PUD amendment. It wasn't just, oh, hey, these are the guys that are going to do it. Anyone could have done it at any time. And your PUD process is fairly confusing and very complicated. And I think staff did a great job working us through that. We work in a lot of jurisdictions. I think that your staff does as good of a staff report and a good of investigation and a great job explaining. We normally have to do a lot more work as it relates to these hearings, but I think PJ and everybody there has done a great job. I want to let Planning Commission know, and this will continue on to City Council, that we've reviewed the staff report. We worked with staff in preparing and understanding it. We came last month. We went back and we answered the fire department's questions about why 30 feet, can they access it? You saw that earlier drawing. One of the things that we didn't get turned in quick enough, that's why Elliot and Austin are there. They brought paper copies. We talked a lot about what would the sections look like. Our hillside has a lot of topography on it. How are these townhomes going to work with tree line and all the other different elements? And so they did bring with them today, I think they gave in a PJ, some cross sections showing a little better than what we had the last time we were here and you had something to look at. But for the most part, unless you have questions of me specifically, I don't really have anything additional to add, although I did want to respond to the owner of the Frontier Apartments. He's not bound in time. He could have at any time done the same process that we're doing. He could have done it earlier than us. He could have asked for the same deviations that we are asking for. There's nothing that prohibited him from doing that. And so I just want to make sure that the Planning Commission understands that your code doesn't say only on this magic day and in this magic circumstance can you come do a PUD modification and also do a major preliminary plat. So we happen to be doing both at the same time. A PUD modification could have been requested at any time by anybody, given the justification and going through the process. The process is expensive, it's lengthy, we've been working at this a long time. So with that, and with the understanding that we've read all the conditions of approval. I have a couple clarifications that I'll get before city council. Mostly there were some comments about, I'm not exactly sure. I have to talk to the engineering department a little bit about what the expectation for widening and possible turn lanes on 4 Mile Road are. But other than that, we understand everything else as it relates to the conditions of approval and accept them. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have. And then I'm not there to sit down, but I'll just get turned off in a minute.
Is there any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, I'm gonna close public comment and look to the board for a motion on, I guess, KPUD 24-01.
I move that the Kalispell Planning Commission adopt staff report KPUD 24-01 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that amended PUD for a Bloomstone be approved subject to the conditions listed below.
Second.
Motion seconded. Discussion about what we've heard.
So there was gonna be apartments here, now there's townhouses in this southern area. Yes.
I think. Yes.
He's nodding, so yeah,
Yes.
okay.
I believe that's what
So that means,
staff related to us.
okay, just making sure I'm understanding. So it's technically it's less people living there, but like more room, sort of. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that.
Well, there's an increase, I think, off the top of my head, of 133 overall.
Okay.
But, one thing that comes about with PUDs, and this was something that kind of goes back to, I think that Chad had some comments as far as why somebody would do a PUD. One of the things that you typically see is if people are doing density shifting. So, if you have straight zoning and you've got, say, 6,000 square foot lots, it's 6,000, 6,000, 6,000 all the way along. In a PUD, you can shift that density around. You look at the growth policy, primarily what's the maximum density that you can do, as well as the underlying zoning that's there. And you might have 4,000 square foot lots in some areas, but something that's bigger in another. So you can take some of that density, allow more open space, shift it around, and you look at it kind of more holistically. So in this Bloomstone PUD, there's certain areas that have got apartments, primarily along the bypass area, that are constructed here. They're kind of talking about doing through this stretch here. But then you also have single family homes and open space that put that out there. And under a PUD, when you're looking at that overall, you're looking at it on a gross basis.
Right.
And in a gross basis, they're only really asking for just over 8 units per acre, is what it works out to, with that density shifting and the mix of housing types that are in there. And after, eliminating some of the multifamily and replacing it with the attached townhomes. So in this high density residential, you actually can get up to 40 units per acre under the city growth policy. So the 8.2 they're asking for is well under 40 units per acre. So we don't see it as a real issue in terms of density that's coming through there. It's consistent with the growth policy that's in place, and it would meet any density requirements we're looking at.
In general, I believe the original Spring Prairie PUD talked about 10 dwelling units an acre. So even Frontier Village, that's what they developed, that was 10 dwelling units an acre. And the rest of Bloomstone as a whole, gross, is developing under 10 dwelling units an acre. We're not looking at where the multifamily is and saying, oh, it's 20, we looked at it gross.
Right.
And that's the way we always do it. So it's in compliance with the density allocations of that area and the growth policy and the original PUD densities.
Well, and I think the townhome idea is much more attractive than putting a bunch of apartments here when there's already some going along tree line, like you said. So making this whole area as like single family units, like townhomes, is just more attractive in my opinion, so.
Well, and this is also just for phase 4, right? So they still need to go through the process with phases 5 and 6.
Yeah,
if they
there's a
wanna
few things
change
that are
the
going on.
PUD,
So
or-
because there's the existing PUD, In the existing plat, phases 5 and 6 wouldn't really need anything other than a building permit when they're coming in for that. With phase 4, we just have the plat for phase 4. They would need to come through city council for final plat. Eventually, they would need to do a new preliminary plat in this remainder area that would be phase 7. So they'd be coming through for any development in there to do a plat.
Which that phase will likely be much lower density because it's going to need to stay under that overall gross density that we've allocated. So that will be the lowest density phase that you're seeing right there.
The remainder lot
Yes.
piece, yeah.
Yep.
And right now, that bottom piece, like phase 5 and 6, those are apartments, is that right? Yeah.
Those would be apartments, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was what was provided for originally. The only change here is there'd be an increase in the number.
Yeah, thank you.
And as far as the complaint that we heard from Frontier, the relationship of a complaint for maybe not being able to apply for a PUD, was that ever a possibility?
It's always a possibility.
Yeah, anybody
Not
could
like
apply,
somebody
but
saying,
they
"No, apply for it."
developed to this, actually a higher density than this site
Yeah.
is gross.
Awesome.
Because they
But
were allowed up to 10, I believe,
Okay,
from my recollection, about 10 dwelling units an acre on the Frontier Village site, which this area as a whole is less than 10 dwelling units
Yeah.
an acre. So-
Well, I think the other thing about PUD, from what I remember, Silverbrook, one of the things about the PUD is it allows you to also adjust for market conditions as well.
Density.
So, in Silverbrook, that's what happened there. There was that adjustment for the market conditions to the north end of Silverbrook. And, we're talking about things that had happened in 2015 with other development in this area. And, perhaps maybe there's a feeling from other applicants throughout the city, and maybe even this one, that as far as apartment construction in general is maybe starting to get on the top end, possibly overdone, and going through and getting into more residential construction too. I'm just speculating, but I go through and I also see the PUD process as allowing for that change in how the market is responding to, if you're on the high end of a certain type of residential in the city. So, that's what happened. I don't know how long ago it was in Silverbrook, but it worked in Silverbrook.
Right. And it changes, and, these developments take a long time to do to do all the construction, to get it up and get it rolling. And you're absolutely right. When there's, a project that's originally approved in 2008 and you're sitting in 2024, things can be different out there. The value of land can be different, the value of the cost of developing. There can be regulatory standards that change relating to stormwater or anything else that are out there. And something like this isn't fixed forever in time if there's a good basis to make an adjustment.
And this is the process for that adjustment. Essentially, you're looking at what is almost a zone change, right? That's what you're looking at. It's a PUD amendment. So this is the process for that, and anybody could do that at any time. I mean, certainly there's factors into what the staff recommendation would be, but we would never tell anybody that they can't apply. They certainly can apply and put anything forth before the city council and planning commission.
Look, 2015 was a different world around here in Kalispell and the valley. So, I mean, at that point in time, what was being built there could have been considered higher density on the high end side too. But like you said, overall, when you're looking at this overall, it's well below that. So, any other discussion?
I'm wondering if there's gonna be any future repercussions if, for example, the market crashes, but developers are already building all these extra units that they wanna do, and then, they back out. Are there repercussions that could damage the city's income, the city's finances, the developers themselves, families? Hypothetically speaking.
The developers have their own.
They've got their own They got their whole financial game and it's pretty tight generally.
Okay.
They're
Just
not,
have a
they're not building them because they love people.
Oh.
No,
Really?
but it's also,
It has nothing tied into these financially whatsoever. It's purely developer-driven, the infrastructure is developer-driven, the city's not paying for any of the infrastructure,
Okay.
so.
They build the roads, they give it to the city. It's. Any other comments? Discussion? Roll call.
Pip Burke,
Aye.
Joshua Borgart,
Aye.
Shelby Odell,
Aye.
Rory Young,
Oh, he
recused. Doug Kaufman,
Yes.
Chad Graham.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Is there a motion for KPP 24-02, the preliminary plat?
It's not me. I don't have the paper.
I move that the Kalispell Planning Commission adopt staff report KPP-24-02 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the preliminary plat for Bloomstone Phase 4 be approved, subject to the conditions listed below.
Second.
Good motion seconded. Any discussion on the preliminary plat?
I mean, I think it was pretty wrapped up in the conditions. There's a lot of work they've got to do and make it work, so as long as they can meet everyone's requirements, then.
My discussion was about all the deviations and, you know, how
Yeah.
that applied to the PUDs and stuff, so I'm good with everything else. Now, roll call.
Shelby Odell,
Aye.
Pip Burke,
Aye.
Doug Kaufman,
Yes.
Joshua Borgart,
Aye.
Chad Graham.
Aye. Motion carries, and I take it this is also July 1st? So this would be in front of the council on July 1st. With that, I'm going to close tonight's public hearing and move into old business.
okay, so last month there was a couple items in front of you. One was the Experimental Aircraft Association's parking lot that they were installing along with the new, in conjunction, I guess, with a new facility at the airport. That conditional use permit went through city council, and I believe they've got their building permit on that. The other project was Tronstead, and that was the Tronstead Meadows Whitetail Crossing project. And that was in front of city council last night. Growth policy amendment passed, so the annexation boundary shifted around that. The annexation is kind of a two-step process, kind of intertwined in one. So you've got the annexation along with the initial zoning, and there was support for the annexation, but did not get 6 votes for what the zoning designation would be. So the annexation didn't move forward, and that meant that the plat was moot. So part of it went through, part of it didn't. But anyway, that's the update on that project.
Okay. New business.
So next month, we don't have any agenda items for a regular meeting. We do have a work session. So we'll just kind of have the regular meeting, open it up, approve the minutes, and then go into a work session. The work session is for an area on the south end of town, right south of Toyota. It's about 95 acres or so, essentially between Toyota and where Fred's Appliance and Gardner Auction House is, and then also from Highway 93 over to Demarsville Road. And there's kind of two parts to what's going on with that. So part of that area, most of that area, was already annexed and has a placeholder PUD on it. It's a B5 type of zone along the highway. There'd be another component that would be subject to an annexation along Demarsville. That would be an R3 single family type of area. But in any case, we'd be doing a work session on that PUD.
Okay. Anything from the board?
Shelby and I both lost our monitors.
Yep, they are.
Oh.
They
Where'd they go?
20 minutes. Oh, well.
They just blinked out, so I don't know what happened. I don't know if I kicked something or what happened, but.
Yeah. It's like sitting in the theater.
The alien.
Well, no, we can see. I mean, it's not a problem. It's just I wanted to let someone know so that if there was a problem.
Better have it fixed before Monday.
I was gonna say, I could
Chop,
get some cranky counselors in here.
All right, with that, we're adjourned.